Hello, this is Jim Hillary, and I'm the Agriculture and Natural Resources Extension Agent for Virginia Cooperative Extension in Loudoun County, Virginia. And I'm here this afternoon to narrate a presentation called Hey Ma, What About Chickens? And it's a program for considerations for starting a backyard flock or not. This agriculture education program is brought to you by Virginia Cooperative Extension in Loudoun office and the Loudoun County Public Library. This program's purpose is to help individuals and family members make informed decisions about starting or keeping a backyard chicken flock. It's not so much a class on how to. We'll talk a little bit about husbandry, but again, the primary focus is for those people who are still working through the decision whether to buy chickens or not. Some terms that you'll hear throughout this presentation, perhaps two that are most important, is that there's a differentiation between layer hens, those that primarily exist to produce eggs, and a broiler hen, which is primarily exists in order to serve as a meat or a dinner bird. So we'll take a look at several considerations for why you may want to start a backyard chicken flock. The first one, it's educational. People can learn much from keeping a flock of chickens. Second, is food freshness. Frankly, eggs don't get much fresher than those that you go out and gather every morning before breakfast. Knowing your food source. There's absolutely no doubt about where your eggs came from if you have your own backyard chicken flock. Fourth, they can be enjoyable pets. They're mostly low maintenance, mostly minimal care. Reason number 5, it brings down home to downtown. And so it's just like Grandpa's farm for adults and youth alike. And this is important for people who live in more populated areas and they don't have the opportunity to drive into one of the more rural areas or to live in one of the more rural areas, experience a small farm. Reason number 6, a backyard chicken flock can facilitate entrepreneurship. There is money to be made from those egg sales. Reason number 7, from a parental perspective, it develops responsibility. Children benefit from a genuine application of responsible behavior. If you look over to the right, you see the photograph. There's a small girl, and she's learning how to hold a chick. And that's an important step in the process of owning and having a backyard chicken flock. It's mind expanding. Keeping chickens healthy and safe requires creative and critical thinking. And again, you can see the photograph with the small girl and she's looking into a brooder and learning about all the aspects of health and caring for animals. Reason number 9, it's a family affair. It can draw families together. In this photograph on the right, you see siblings. They too are looking into a brooder and they're sharing time together as brother and sisters. Number 10, backyard flocks can relieve stress. And many people believe that going out and interacting with their chickens and watching the chickens, feeding the chickens is a way to step away from the challenges of non-rural life, and it provides a stress relief. Speaking to the husbandry aspect a little bit, chickens do need care, starting with water. And in this slide, you see several different types of watering systems. These cost somewhere between $15 to $30, depending on which you purchase. One advantage of the canister type that you see in the far left is during the winter months, that canister can be set on top of a heater or a heater pad in order that the water doesn't freeze when the temperatures are cold. The suspended or gravitational systems that you see to the right, they're much more difficult to heat and likely to freeze up during the cold winter months. Regarding food, bag of chicken feed generally weighs 50 pounds and the cost is somewhere between $12 and $16 per bag, although if you buy organic feed, the price can jump to $20, perhaps even $25 per bag. Just for planning purposes, allow about a 1/4 pound of feed each day per bird. And there's a variety of different feeds, and you can see those if you take a walk through your local co-op or you go to Tractor Supply. There's just general chicken feed, but there's also some high protein laying mash. You can feed your chickens scraps, vegetable scraps and fruit from the table. They also enjoy cracked corn, seeds, sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, and it's important to add some grit to help them in their digestion system, and that's in the form of crushed oyster shell. Nesting. Your layer birds will be nesting. In this photograph, you see several different types of nests. Some are very simple as a 5-gallon bucket laid on its side. Others are a little bit fancier, as you can see, and set up diagonally for aesthetic purposes. What you may find, though, is that if you have 10 birds, it's not necessary to have 10 individual boxes, because it's likely that the birds will choose favorites and they'll share those amongst themselves. In fact, at times you may see where the birds are lined up waiting for their turn to get into a nesting box, while there's other boxes that are available to them. It's their own individual choice. Roosting. At nighttime, your hens will want to roost. It's just a natural inclination, and it's a sense of security provided from being off the ground and away from predators. And so your roost should be at least 18 to 24 inches off of the floor. The type of roost that you have is only limited by your imagination, as you can see in some of these photographs, people are using sticks and 2x4s or ladders, but essentially what you're trying to replicate is a tree. So the birds feel a sense of security up off the ground. In terms of how large a roost should be or how long a roost should be, you should think to plan about 6 inches per bird. Coops and runs. You can see in the central photograph, there's a rooster and several hens. And in this particular pastoral image, they're out there scratching through what looks like a manure pile. And that's very good. And that sometimes is an environment that you can replicate with your backyard flock. But what this illustration doesn't show is the fox that's probably lurking in the background underneath the shrubs or on the other side of the wall, and it's just waiting for an opportunity to pounce on one of those birds. And so as nice and natural as it seems to have the birds out and about, as you see in this painting, in reality, for their own safety, it's better to have a system that allows them to maneuver and to get out and have access to pasture, but also keeps them safe. We're going to look at several different varieties. These two that are pictured here are very functional. You can see that in the one on the right, there's a cat sitting on top, yet cannot get at the birds which are in the run below. Cats generally aren't a problem for the adult birds. Small peeps, that's a different story. The coop and runs that you see in the lower image are strictly functional. It's for a production operation, and those get moved every day so that the birds inside have access to fresh pasture. When sizing a coop and a run, you should think about 3 square feet per bird inside the coop and 8 square feet per bird outside in the run. Here are some very high-end coops, and it's reasonable to expect to pay upwards to $5,000 for a coop and a run that looks like for these. Similar to the coop and run is a chicken tractor, and 2 of those are pictured at the top of this slide. The idea being you can see the wheels, you can move these about a pasture, but what both of those tractors are lacking is any type of protection for the birds. And so if you choose to use a chicken tractor, you're going to have some sort of a fence device or some sort of a mechanism to protect the birds from predators. You can see a compromise in the chicken tractor in the lower part of the photograph where it has a run, like we saw previously, but it also has wheels so that it can be moved about in a pasture. Dusting. Your birds will want to dust as a means to manage their external parasite load. And so it helps in killing mites or lice. It doesn't have to be fancy. As you can see in the lower left, the dusting medium has simply been placed in an old tire, and the birds are quite happy with that. Up above that photograph is fancier, more aesthetic dusting box, and that's been made out of stone. If you don't provide any type of dusting material at all, what happens is over on the far right, you can see that the birds will make their own dusting boxes or holes. And these become problematic if they're out in a pasture, because once you move the birds, the holes are still there. It's something that livestock can step into, or something that you as a farmer can step into if not paying attention. Chickens are tasty, and that's true for many other creatures besides humans, and all of the animals that you see depicted in this slide are present here in the northern Piedmont region of Virginia. Predators you're most likely going to experience with a backyard flock are the domestic dog, as you see in the top right, whether that's your dog or your neighbor's dog, or a fox, which is over the top of the left. And after the fox, the other most common is probably going to be a raccoon. Any of the other animals that you see will be there waiting for an opportunity to enjoy your delicious birds. In terms of breeds to consider, there's many. Again, want to point to the categorization. If your intent is to have chickens or a backyard flock for the purposes of having fresh eggs every morning, then you're going to want to look to a layer variety. If, however, you wish to have backyard chickens for a meal, then you'll look to a meat bird or a broiler type bird. The URL at the bottom of this slide points you to a source of chicken breeds, and it provides the chart, and it's very helpful in differentiating between the birds. It may be that you want to choose your birds based on their coloration, feather coloration, and you can see there's a lot of different coloration varieties in the photograph in the far left. It may be that you wish to have birds and select your birds based on the color of their eggs. Over in the far right, you can see two birds. They're actually the same age. One is much larger, and that's the broiler. And it simply gains weight much faster than the layer, which is the red bird to the right. And so at a certain point, a meat bird or a broiler simply becomes too large for it to stay healthy on its own. And that's why you don't want to have a meat or a broiler variety if you're really looking to gather eggs every morning. It's not all peaches and cream. As birds, there's diseases that are associated with them, and those are considerations that are important. Okay, so we talked a lot about why you may want to have a backyard flock. Now we're going to flip those same reasons, take those same reasons why you want to have them, we're going to flip them around and talk about the disadvantages. And yes, they're educational, as we see right here in this first one. But what about learning when it stops being fun? And I think the perspective here is that from a parent, that if you purchase a backyard flock because you want to teach your children about animals, you need to think about the time when the new birds have lost their novelty and interacting with them or gathering eggs or cleaning up after them has become a chore. Number two, yes, the eggs are fresh, but they don't gather themselves. Somebody has to go out every day and collect them and bring them back in. In terms of knowing your food source, there's no doubt where those eggs originated, but where will they go down? You may find that in your flock, they create or they lay many more eggs than your family is able to eat or sell. And so what do you do then? It's not unusual for families with a backyard flock to have a refrigerator full of eggs, and then they have to give consideration as to how they're going to dispose of those, whether they give them to a food pantry or whether they want to continue to try and sell them. The idea that chickens make enjoyable pets, yeah, they're mostly low maintenance and they're mostly minimal care. But again, I say mostly. They're not always low maintenance or low care. In terms of bringing Downhome to downtown, yes, it may be just like Grandpa's farm, but just like at Grandpa's farm, there's poop to be cleaned up. And in the family, there needs to be a decision made as to who's going to go out and clean the coop. Or if you have a backyard flock that is allowed to walk around, perhaps across the patio, who's going to clean up the poop off the patio. That's a consideration. And yes, a backyard flock does facilitate entrepreneurship, but a consideration is, does the sale of your eggs produce enough revenue to cover the cost of maintaining them? And oftentimes they don't. And so if you're thinking that there's going to be a lot of money made or a great profit in maintaining a backyard flock, maybe, but it's likely that you're going to be spending more money to maintain that flock than you're going to be recovering from the sale of eggs. In terms of developing responsibility, again, parents, children do benefit from a genuine application of responsible behavior, but that's if they're willing. Again, thinking back to what happens when the novelty of the birds has worn off, and now having that backyard flock is simply a chore. In terms of being mind expanding, yes, keeping chickens healthy and safe does inspire creative thinking. But again, back to the parents, there's some creative thinking that's associated with explaining what's happened to the backyard flock when the healthy and safe ideas didn't work. And it is very possible that as an owner of a backyard flock, that you go out one morning and all the birds are dead. And whether that's from disease or whether that's a predator, that's a story to be explained to the children. In terms of being a family affair, yes, chickens can draw families together, but as you might imagine, they can also part them as well. Backyard flocks can relieve stress. Must it be said, when we look at that conversely, if you're finding that they've lost their novelty, that cleaning up after them is now becoming a chore, it may be, particularly from the parent's perspective, having this flock is simply no longer a stress reliever. This is a recording, so there is not an opportunity for me to answer your questions, but I encourage you to contact me. My email is james58@vt.edu, and my telephone number is area code 703-777-0373, and I'm happy to entertain questions. In fact, I invite them. Yeah, thank you very much for sitting through our presentation. Hey, Ma, what about chickens?